Dad, there was a few questions on your questionnaire there, and I don't know if you got that filled out yet or not, but I figured we might as well put it on tape. How'd you get started coon hunting? How old were you?
I was probably 5 or 6 years old before I ever went coon hunting, but I was born down in London, Kentucky. There was no coon down there at all. And my dad, he was a big hunter, and he had possum dogs. And I can remember he used to carry me and take me along, and we'd tree a big old possum, and I thought that was the awfulest thing I ever seen. Dad just came back from World War II, and jobs were tough. And he got a job here in Ohio at General Motors, and we moved up here with a suitcase. We rode a bus and a suitcase in hand, and we came to the great state of Ohio. But we moved in a little old cabin down there that we had rented along the river, and there was a cabin next door to us. And this guy had hounds, and he had, at that time, he had all red bone hounds. And I was just a little bitty guy, probably, like I said, maybe 5 or something, and I was totally out of my element. And I looked across the fence and I said, "Mister, are those good tree dogs?" And he looked back over and he said, "What do you know about a tree dog, son?" And I said, "Well, not very much." And he said, "Come over here and I'll help you cross the fence." And that guy, he was my mentor. I followed him 1,000,000 miles. His name was Frank Childers, and my goodness, he had the best dogs in the country. In fact, his bud dog was the first night champion redbone that ever lived in UKC. But I learned a lot from Frank. He was a dog man. He was a good handler, and could outrun a reindeer. Boy, I mean, he was hard to stay with. We'd go hunting, and I was probably 15 before I ever got to where I could stay in light of that guy. But I'll never remember or never forget when I won the world championship. He was the first guy that came to my office, and he said, "Son, I knew you could do it." And he was just as proud of me as if I were his son.
That's pretty special right there. What made you think you wanted to hunt the English dogs, Dan?
I followed Frank, and he had English or red bones and some black and tans, and not knocking any of those breeds, but they just really wasn't the type of dog that I liked. And I found a English dog when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and his name was Blue, of course. But I followed that dog for several years by myself mostly, and with a couple of my school buddies. And I finally sold him for what I thought was a big chunk of change, because I was 14, 15 then. And I sold that dog for $150. And I bought several other dogs in between. Nothing suited me. I bought Walker dogs and red bones and black and tans. And I ran across an English dog up in Miamisburg, Ohio, and his name was Duke. He was just, I don't know, maybe a year and a half old. And I bought him, and I set in on him heavy. And that's the dog my wife was talking about when we got married. I sold that dog and bought some used furniture so we'd have a place to sit down and lay down. And after we'd been married maybe 6 months, and that's the first time in my life I'd been without a dog, I told my wife, I'm going to get me some kind of a little dog that I can go out and tree a coon with. I'm not going to get back into it like I was, because I've always been ate up with the game. And I went out and I bought a little dog for $50, and another guy went with me. We turned him loose, and he went down there and he hit a track, and he started mopping and waxing up and down a ditch line about 15 times. And I told him, I said, "Give me that gun. I'm not going to follow something like that." And he said, "Oh, don't kill that dog. Give him to me." So I did. And I went home. We had $350 to our name, and I knocked on a guy's door at probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, got him out of bed, and I bought his dog. And I had several night champion Walker dogs. Had a female called Big Valley Jean. She was a speed demon, and I mean a locating fool that had the coon. And I ran her in 3 hunts. Well, the first 2 hunts that I ran her in, I won first place in both of them. And she was probably 3.5, 4 years old. I mean, a mature dog. And so I took her down here to a hunt in southern Ohio, and I drawed out with a guy named Eddie Bowman that had a little real small English female. I bet she didn't weigh 40 pounds at the very most. Little old ticked up job. And Eddie and I went out there and we went to war. I mean, I was hunting a coon dog, a seasoned dog. And the only way I beat Eddie was on the last tree. We were split, and Eddie Bowman found my coon for me, and I won the cast. I made 3 wins in a row with Gene. But we were walking back toward the truck, and I told that guy, I said, man, that's a fine dog you're packing there. And I said, how old is that dog? And he said, 17 months old. Well, I about fell over. And I said, that's a 17-month-old dog? And he said, yeah. He said, I haven't had a chance to hunt her a whole lot. I took her to a couple of bench shows and won them, made her bench champion. And I said, would you sell that dog? And he said, oh, I wouldn't care anything about it. And I said, well, would you though? And he said, yeah, for enough money I would. And he said, I'd take $500 for her. And this was Lady Bird. I didn't have $500. I came home, sold dogs, guns, fishing poles, and everything in the world, and went back down. Probably 2 weeks later, I had the money rounded up, and I got down there, and he said, well, I don't know if I want to sell her or not. He said, I just won the Indiana State Championship with her, and we hum-hawed around there, and he said, I'd hate to take less than $600 for her. And I laid the money up on the table, and I told Eddie, I said, this is all I've got, brother. I want the dog, and I want her bad, and I'll do her justice. And so he reached and he got the money, and I started hunting her. I won a bunch of hunts in that little thing. She'd get out here and squeal and squall on a track. A lightning fast strike dog and could run a coon, and was absolutely a death trap on the tree. And when she'd come on that tree, she'd sound like a completely different dog. She sounded like a 90-pound bulldog fell on there. You couldn't count the barks that thing made. But I didn't run her in any real big major hunts and didn't really have the money, but I took her, I want to think that might have been in 68 or 69. I took her to the U.S. Championship in Northern Ohio, and I won that with her. And we couldn't even, we just had a small Vega-type car, I think it was, a little station wagon. We couldn't even get the trophies in the back end. The dog had to ride up in the front seat with us. But I hunted her around. I took her to Autumn Oaks. I was looking for a stud dog, and I went around to several guys. I think I talked to 6 different guys that had advertised stud dogs, and so I invited each one of them. Hey, let's go for a hunt. Well, I didn't tell them them other guys was going. They thought just me and them and Lady Bird was going, I guess. But we left there with 8 dogs, 7 stud dogs and a Lady Bird, and like I say, all of them but one was highly advertised. And when he'd been doing a lot of winning, but he wasn't advertised yet. And we turned them 8 dogs loose. And I don't know, we treated several coons, 5 or 6 coons, but it wasn't nothing but a 2-dog hunt. And that was Lady Bird and Boyd's Little Joe. I took her down there then. I bred her Little Joe, and talked Gene in to start advertising Joe. In fact, I wrote the first 2 or 3 ads for him. And I come home, and she had her litter of pups. I kept 4 of those dogs out of that first litter. 2 of them are now Hall of Famers, and that was the Blue Cash dog and Bates' Little Bird that I sold my good friend Alan Collins. The third dog was Wild Woody that I won the NKC World Championship with. He was a grand. They were all grands. And the other one was Ralston's Dave. Ralston's Blue Dave. He won Walker Days one year. Big Dave did. But there was 4 puppies that I kept, and what a litter of dogs, man! I'm telling you, they were something to dream about. But I started hunting cash then. I didn't get to run him in a lot of hunts. The rascal, he won everything I took him to. In fact, I was scoring so many points with him that I went to hunt, and they put a special judge on me because it didn't look real, the scores that I was coming in with. And they selected Philip Meeks, who I didn't know at that time. They selected him as our special judge, and we rolled back in there, and it wasn't that good a night, but I forget, I had 1,200 points or something. And Philip walked in there and he said, boys, you can kill the rumors. He's for real. and I never did forget that. That really made me feel good. I took him to the ACHA World Championship at Oblong, Illinois, I believe. And back then, that they determined the winner by the last night, and the dogs hunted alone. And the dog that came in with the high score was the world champion. And so I came in, I think I placed fourth over there with him, and I retired Cash. I think I ran him in one more hunt after that. That's all I ever ran him in. But meanwhile, Philip Meeks came up. He called me. He had a dog called John that had a set of bogus papers on him. And he wanted me to inspect this dog for him and single register him. He wanted to make the papers right on him. And John, he was out of a little red female, and his daddy was Grand Night champion Boone Creek Buck, a Walker dog that was out of Boone Creek Mike, and Mike was out of Banjo 2. But he brought him up, and I was thinking, hey, if this, and he already had a first place win on him, and I thought, if this guy's got a first place win and a best of show on him, and he's wanting to get the papers right, he don't have to do a whole lot for me to sign off on that dog. So they wanted to know if they could bring a little female, his buddy, and I said, sure, go ahead and bring her. And so I forget who owned her, but I think in my mind, well, they probably have brought her to help him along the way. He was young, real young. And we went out there, and I'm telling you, the little female ran all over the woods, and John just treed coons all over the woods. He was standing as high on that tree as he could reach, boy, just like a big stud horse, ever breath. And we get ready to leave the tree. Philip said, let's go, John. And he just dropped down like a house dog and followed him off through the woods. Well, I started aggravating Phil until I finally got John balked. And but then I had been breeding Cash a lot, and I was getting some pups, and I thought, I really need the right type of stud dog, my type, the type that I like, to breed to these dogs. So that's one of the reasons I wanted John. Plus, he was a real coon dog. But I ran John a lot of hunts, finished him up as made a Grand Night champion out of him. He was, I think he was a show champion. I know he was a show champion when I bought him. And I couldn't tell you the hunts that I won with John. I placed him ninth one year in the world hunt, and I think I done something in the English states. I don't know what all they did with him. That was a long time ago, but he did the job for me.
It's probably about, 75, 76?
That was in 76. Because I know it was 76. My first world hunt that I went to was in 73 with Cash. I didn't go back in 74. Wasn't real satisfied with the way things were handled. I went to NKC World Hunt in 74 and won that with Woody. And
was that the first NKC World Hunt they ever had?
That was the first NKC World Hunt they ever had.
I think another pup in that litter might have been the first Grand Night champion NKC dog ever also, wasn't he?
Cash was the first NKC Grand Night champion. That's right.
And Woody was the first world champion, all the same litter.
He was the first world champion. They were both out of the same litter. Yeah. But I got Ramblin' Sue about that same time, and finished old Sue into the Grand Night champion and placed her way up in the world hunt. I'm not real sure where she did place at, but she was a good dog. In fact, she was the mother of the Tina bitch. Ramblin' Sue, she's in the Hall of Fame. Her daughter Tina was in the Hall of Fame. Sue was bred to Little Joe, and then Tina, bred to Speck, produced the world champion Hard Time Hannah. So old Sue, she put her 2 cents worth in as far as my breeding program. She was right in there.